In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is Drew Hill, joined as always by Chris Herrington. We are recording this on Tuesday. The Grizzlies will take on the Philadelphia 76ers tonight. So I imagine many people will be listening to this post 76ers game. What's the score prediction? What do we think is going to happen? Let's get a score prediction to try to call our shot real quick. I will go Sixers. This is without looking at anything. I think the Sixers are healthier and probably in a little bit better of a position. Embiid's questionable. I'll take the Sixers barely by 3.
I'm going Grizzlies 119-115.
Okay, maybe I'm a hater then.
Home win. The Grizzlies have, I want to get to the specifics, a little bit of that game, it being on NBC, but this is a good opportunity to get a win against a team with a winning record, a barely winning record, but still a winning record. The Grizzlies only have 2 of those all season. One of those, I'm talking about teams that currently have a winning record, not on the day they played or whatever. They won at Phoenix in October.
Yep.
And then they won at Minnesota, a game I was at. That was a game without Anthony Edwards. And that's kind of it. And the streak has been broken in a bad way where the truth of this Grizzlies team was, well, they beat the bad teams and they lose to the good teams. And this month, there's been 4 games where it's gone away from that, but 3 of them have gone the other way, where they've lost twice to Washington and once to Utah, 1 win against Minnesota. If they're going to hang around and hope to give themselves time to get healthy, which I think is still the thing, they got to start winning some games against teams with winning records, and this is about as good an opportunity as you're going to get.
This will be our first look at VJ Edgecombe in Memphis.
Yeah.
You know, he was a player that played Summer League in Salt Lake City when I was out there and looked really good. So I'm excited to get to see him in person against the Grizzlies. There'll be some interesting matchups stuff with him. Yeah,
Ja Morant, Tyrese Maxey. Talking a lot about a game. It probably has already happened when some people are listening, so we can move on. But the big thing about the game, which we'll both be at tonight, is on NBC. I'm pretty sure it's definitely the first time in Memphis Grizzlies history, but I'm pretty sure it's just the first time in Grizzlies history. They've been on NBC, man. I want to sing some Round Ball Rock.
I was going to say.
Are you excited?
Yeah. Basketball, gimme. You know, that's the SNL skit.
Get hyped.
Great SNL skit if you haven't seen it on Round Ball Rock. I wish we could drop that in here. I'm sure that's copyrighted, Natalie. I don't think we can do the. Yeah, well, I don't know if anyone wants to hear us sing it.
We just did, and that's about as much as you're going to get.
No, yeah, Round Ball Rock, great. Where does Round Ball Rock rank in those? I'm someone that loves like the sports theme songs. The SEC on CBS song, college football is long been my favorite. The NCAA tournament has a great tune to it. I think Round Ball Rock might be top 3 though. It's right there in the mix.
Among things that are officially designated, Round Ball Rock would be number 1 for me, and One Shining Moment would be last.
Well,
and
no, not One
things
Shining Moment. I'm talking the NCAA tournament theme.
I don't remember any of the themes. The greatest basketball song of all time, of course, is "Basketball" by Curtis Blow. But right. After that, I go Round Ball Rock number 2.
Yeah, basketball. Yeah, that's a good one. That's definitely a good one. Space Jam. You got the Space Jam theme song. Definitely not in the same stratosphere as Basketball by Curtis Blow, but still a recognizable tune. Well, since we've already gone off the rails here on this podcast, let's start with "There's More to Life Than Basketball." How was holiday the Christmas holiday in Arkansas?
It was good, man. I think as I noted last week, three households, 3 towns, definitely not cities, 3 towns in one day. We had a 5-generation Christmas gathering at my grandmother's house in DeWitt, Arkansas, population 3,200 maybe. I think half of that is my family. So that was a good time. A good time here in Memphis with everybody. And now I've sent the rest of my immediate family away to also multiple cities, and here I am hanging out. How about you?
Well, it is good to have you back.
First Christmas
with the
Harper
baby.
Hill.
Yeah, that's difficult. That was it. Let's just say this. I'm going to be leaning on you a little bit this podcast to talk about the last 2 games, because when you have a baby in your household, and it's the first Christmas, especially when it's a newborn, like everyone wants to be there.
We also had a first Christmas with my new nephew.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Jack Casey Herrington had his first Christmas.
Good.
So there we go.
Shout out Jack. Yeah, I think I was a little bit ready for the house to clear out by the end of it, because it was very crowded, because everybody wants to come see the new baby. So it was difficult. I was glad you were in town, because it was difficult to catch all of the 2 Grizzlies games with the chaos that was ensuing at the Hill household over the holiday. And I'm also convinced of this, and Natalie doesn't have a mic in front of her, but she
never does. She's a coward. She has a kid. You have kids. I am convinced, and this is not complaining, this is just an observation. I am convinced that having a baby in November is the worst time of the year to have a baby.
No, December is.
Well, maybe December, because they're really little, they're really fragile. You don't want to get them sick. You don't, especially in those first 2 months. So you can't really take them anywhere. And then even when they turn 2 months old, you're still worried about them getting sick, because they're still so little, and it's still not warm outside. It's still sick season by the time you get to February. You got the seasonal depression, and so the days go by so quickly. I think the best time to have a kid is like maybe in February, where those first 2 months you're just hanging out in the house, and then the weather's turning nice, the days are getting longer, you're ready to take the baby out and go do stuff.
Both my kids were born in January. I have to think, not to speak for the women of the world, but I got to think the worst time to have a baby is like summer. August, September, where the height of your pregnancy is the height of the summer. That is what you don't want to be dealing with.
Summer
Maybe.
is worse. December is a close second.
Yeah.
My wife is fully convinced that this was the worst possible time to have a kid. It's also not great timing.
I would say being 9 months pregnant in Memphis in August is probably not a great time.
Yeah, it's not great timing from a Grizzlies schedule perspective either, because we do have this international trip coming up in a couple weeks, and it'll be fun. Don't get me wrong. It'll be really cool to see the NBA international atmosphere, but it's not exactly the best timing for having a little baby in the house who keeps you up all night. So anyway, now we can move on. We're caught up from the holidays, all of that. The Grizzlies did play 2 games. They got a win and a loss, I think, since we last recorded.
Well,
maybe 3, but we don't really go back 3 games. We stick to 2.
And got Ja Morant back. I mean, that's the headlines since last time we spoke. Ja Morant has returned 2 games, and he is good to go for, as far as we know, for the game tonight in Philadelphia as we speak. And the Grizzlies got a split. And not coincidentally, probably, I think that split also along the lines of how well Ja played. That's not the only factor, but it was a factor. I thought Ja was fantastic in his first game back against Milwaukee. Only had 17 points, but only on 12 field goal attempts, something like that, maybe 11. He was very selective on the offense. He only attempted 1 3-pointer, and that's one where he got fouled on, so it didn't register as a field goal attempt. Had 10 assists, was dynamic in transition as both a scorer and a passer. I think was really you could really see the effort defensively, chasing around A.J. Green, the Bucks shooter. And he was just terrific in that game. Grizzlies won big. There was no Giannis there. And then the game at Washington, Morant had a good stat line, 21 points, 7 assists. Some of that scoring came late when the game was mostly decided. Defensively, he was not as good. That was just a sloppy game for the whole team. I thought, other than they had a 19-0 run in the third quarter where they really clamped down on defense and got the transition game going. But for the most part, that was a sloppy game, and you add the sloppiness with some poor 3-point shooting. And that was a big disappointment. This is twice in the last, week and a half, basically, week and a half to 2 weeks, that the Grizzlies, tipped off against the Washington Wizards with a chance to get to 500, and they failed on both attempts. And now they're going to face a schedule where I believe the next 6 games are against teams with winning records. They're 15-17 going into that 6-game stretch. There's no guarantee they ever get back to 500 in the season, but it could be a while unless they start winning some games they're not supposed to win.
Morant was a team low -22 in the game against Washington. That was in 27 minutes, up a tick from the first return game, which you thought he was probably on a minutes restriction given the amount of time that he played. Cedric Coward only gave you 23 minutes, but obviously that was probably strategic as well on the Grizzlies' part in the Washington game.
I think Coward only playing 23 impacted that game to me more than Morant only playing 27, especially when they lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in the second half, and you're already without Vince Williams and all the other players, and they found themselves cobbling together some lineups where you're having to play, Gigi Jackson, maybe scaling down, Omex Prosper, more of a wing than a big, and they weren't ideal lineups. The Coward thing is interesting because, he missed a game, maybe 2 games. I can't remember. He's been on the injured list with heel soreness a couple games. And, it was not a long-term thing, like a lot of Grizzlies things. He got back in short order. But he's been 25 minutes or less the last 3 games. And Isolo talked about that a little bit, I think maybe before the Milwaukee game. I can't remember before or after. And I'm paraphrasing here because his answer was somewhat complicated. But he basically talked about how the franchise is monitoring Coward's workload and making decisions of when they can dial it up and when they need to dial it back. I think this is related partly to the Hill injury. It's related to him being a rookie facing an NBA schedule for the first time, coming off of a college season last year where he only played 6 games in college and he missed most of the season with a shoulder injury. So I think they have a program in place, whatever it is, to manage his workload. And that has limited his playing time in some of these games. It hasn't been foul trouble. It hasn't been performance. It's been that. It's limited his playing time. And I think, it's been to the detriment of the team on a short-term basis. But obviously they're making a long-term calculation with him over the course of this season and his career. I
mean, it is somewhat understandable if he's dealing with a heel that is bothering him. He didn't play, obviously, as you mentioned, a ton in his final college season. And he's played a lot. He's played a lot early on in the season for the Grizzlies. So I know that that's going to be a point of frustration if it continues for a while, but I think for at least
it's rational though.
A shorter stint, that is rational. My other observation from the Wizards game, just generally speaking, and then I want to circle back to Ja again. Just feels like it's going to be difficult for this Grizzlies team to win if you're not going to get efficient shooting from Cam Spencer and Santi Aldama, because those two, they need one of those guys. Those are the sort of the 2 wild card X factor. Wait, this is production that's semi-reliable. And you had Cam Spencer under 10 points at 8 points. That's got to be the first time he scored under 10 points in a long time. I know he had a streak going of several games. It was into the double digits of 10-point performances. He's 4 for 11, 0 for 5
That was
for
his
3.
first single-digit scoring game since November 20th.
Right.
So more than a month.
So, you've come to rely on both him and Santi Aldama to give you some sort of offensive punch. And Santi was 5 for 14 and 1 for 4 from 3. Santi maybe isn't talked about enough because he's been pretty good this season for Memphis. I did something right before the Christmas holiday on him a little bit. Man, he's been so good shooting from the corners, which I think is a skill that matters in his role. He has had some very good performances. Now, there are ups and downs to Santi Aldama's game. We've come to learn that over the last 3 seasons. He'll have a few games where he'll jump out and give you 30 points. But this was not a good night.
Here's an odd thing on Santi, and he's broken from these last 2 games we're talking about. We had 14 points against the Wizards and 12 against Milwaukee. Before those 2 games, in the month of December, every game he had played in the month of December before those 2, he had either scored more than 20 or less than 10. There's been a little bit of a feast or famine with him as a scorer, a little bit more consistent on some of the other parts of the game. A little bit feast or famine with him offensively. Of course, he is coming off the bench in most of these games. He started some, with Edey and Lando out. They've had him back in the starting lineup with Jaren. but he's not necessarily someone you're expecting to get 20 points every night. He's not in that role with the team necessarily, but he's been a little up and down over the month. Like it averages out to 16 points a game, but it's not like he's getting 16 points every night. He's getting 37 or he's getting 8. It's more that kind of thing.
If you were going to play dependability rankings when healthy on the Grizzlies, well, I mean, it's a tough game to play.
Yeah.
It's a difficult game to play. And obviously there's nuance to that, right? Because Ja and Jaren are capable of giving you much more than what Cam Spencer's capable of giving you on a night-to-night basis.
I mean, Spencer before the Washington game had been the most consistent guy on the team, probably. Another guy who's been really consistent lately in a smaller role, and then he got injured, was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who I think has really sort of come around after a rough start, but now he's out with a hamstring injury. I mean, the injury thing just won't go away. It's like every time you get somebody back, you're putting 1 or 2 more players out, and it's really a tight thing, for them to navigate.
Okay, back to Ja.
Yeah.
We're 6 weeks from the trade deadline. This noise is not going to go away.
It's closer to 5 as we record. He came back 6 weeks from the deadline, so we're creeping up on 5 weeks from the deadline.
Obviously, this is a topic that has – it was a point of frustration for me somewhat earlier in the season because that's really when all the Ja trade chatter was taking place. And at that point, and it was because of it was because of the disagreement.
The trade chatter erupted because of that deal in that Lakers game.
It was too early at that point for the Grizzlies to do anything. So it felt sort of meaningless, like shouting into nothingness. And now you are approaching a time when it makes more sense if the Grizzlies were to make a decision like that. We've talked about it over and over and over again on this podcast. The Grizzlies are going to have to decide whether they believe Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. in tandem or solo are capable of being a lead star on a championship team, because that Zach Kleiman has made it very clear that is the goal. And I think part of what's been so disappointing is you haven't really gotten to have that full evaluation because Ja and Edie have played 4 minutes on the court together this season. So it's been really hard to know where things stand in that department. So I'll just set you up with this, Chris. Where do you think things stand on the Ja Morant stuff? What does make sense? How do you sort of break down the situation that is Ja Morant's future in Memphis?
Well, the funny thing is there was an eruption of not rumor. Rumor is too strong. There was a rumor. There was an explosion of conjecture, of made up, of speculative Ja Morant trade talk in response to what happened in late October, the blow up after the Lakers game, the team suspension. There was this explosion of trade chatter based on that incident that was way overblown. The incident was overblown, and the trade chatter as a response to that incident was overblown. The fundamentals that could well lead to a Ja Morant trade at some point existed before that moment, and they still exist. And if something happens that breaks up the Ja Morant Grizzlies relationship, whether it's now or next summer or the year after or at any point, it's going to be because of those underlying fundamentals more than it's about like that one incident that sort of got too much attention. And it's about his availability, which has been very erratic for multiple years now. It's about his production that when he has played is not at the level it was a few years ago. And it's about the contractual situation. We've talked about this on the pod before. I wrote about it in a mailbag answer, but the column I did this week is the first time I sort of led with that as a topic in a column. And it's because, okay, Ja's back, the trade deadline's coming. This is now a real thing for the next month. And at some point, he has 2.5 years left on his current contract. At some point, like, contracts end, and either you give players a new contract or they're with another team, right? That's the way it obviously works for everyone, and that can go in different ways. In the column I wrote, I cited 3 previous examples. Dillon Brooks, that's someone they carried through the very end of a contract, and then he went to another team in free agency. I don't think that is what they want to have happen with Ja Morant. I don't think that's what they wanted to have happen with Dillon Brooks until they got to that point. Like, I don't think when they began the final season of Dylan Brooks' contract, they already knew they weren't going to bring him back. That's something that happened over the course of that season where that determination was made. I think given the stature of Ja Morant, I don't think they want to even get to the point where they're going into the final season of that contract not knowing what the future is.
They didn't with Jaren.
That's right. Jaren is the other example. With Jaren, they did what they needed to do to give him an extension just before he entered the final year of that contract. So they got the extension done before they got to the final year. And then the third example I threw out was Jonas Valanciunas. He was also coming out of the next to last season of a contract. You know, you're about to begin the final season of a contract. He wanted an extension. The Grizzlies decided we don't want to give him this extension, so they traded him before the calendar flipped and he started that final year. So there's 3 different ways they've done it. They've taken a player through the end of a contract and the player's left. They've got an extension done before the final year. They've traded a player instead of giving them an extension before the final year. So those are 3 potential paths with Ja, right? Now there's more time. Ja has 2 seasons left after this one. So if you think about it in terms of making a decision before you get to the final year, you can take that through this trade deadline. You can take it through next summer. You can take it through next season's trade deadline, and you can take it all the way up to the following summer before the calendar flips, like they did with Jaren. And it could be that they carry it out that long before they make a final determination. I think it would be too messy to take it that long, is my sense. I don't think that would be the preference.
Yes, the timing is certainly interesting because Ja was eligible for an extension this last offseason.
Right.
There was some thought that maybe he would get it, didn't get it. No deal happened.
Right.
So can you really, this is the question, can you really go into next season and say, okay, Ja, we're just going to have you on the same contract again? Or is that going to be a point of conflict in the relationship between him and the Grizzlies? We don't know the answer to that for certain.
Yep.
But that does seem to be a pressure point here, something that they have to think about. It's different than the Jaren situation because you're right, 2 years out. Yep. You have 2 more seasons to play versus Jaren, which he had 1 at the point that they did the renegotiate and extend. So like, I would just ask you that. But
one of the differences there is they could not have extended Jaren early because of the nature of his contract.
Right.
So it wasn't really an option, and everyone knew it wasn't an option, and they knew you sort of had to get to a certain point. It's an option with Ja. It was an option last summer. It'll be an option next summer to get it done early. And so they have 2 buttons on the table in front of them. They have that would alter the current course. The current course is he's under contract for 2.5 years, and after 2.5 years, the contract will end, right? You have 2 buttons you can press to alter that course. One of them is giving him a contract extension that he signs, and the other is trading him. So does a point come before the end of that contract where they decide to press one of those buttons? That's sort of the real question here. They can't press the extension button in the next month, but they could press the trade button ahead of the deadline. And so I'm not saying that's going to happen. There's been no indication it will. But I do think these next 5 weeks between now and the deadline, it will be an interesting time for Ja Morant and the way the Grizzlies evaluate Ja Morant.
I think there's reason to advocate for not pressing any button until the offseason.
That's where I've sort of indicated.
Given the state of the Grizzlies right now, because we talked about it, the evaluation that needed to take place. You needed to see what Ja would look like next to Zach Edey. You needed to see what those 2 could look like at the peak of their powers. You needed to see how they fit in Tomas Isolo's system. You needed to see if you felt like the analogy that we used before the season started, the car that the Grizzlies in needed to go back to the shop, or if it was going to be capable of driving down the interstate and taking them to a little further than they've been able to get these last few seasons. Because the goal isn't to be bounced out of the first round of the playoffs like they were against OKC. The goal, as Zach Kleiman put it himself, was to seek higher end outcomes. You can't know if Ja is capable of taking this team to those higher end outcomes without seeing what Ja looks like with the totality of not the totality of the roster, but at least the important pieces that you were expecting to be around him. That's Ty Jerome. That's, Zach Edey for certain. So I don't know. It just feels difficult to press the trade button before you get to the deadline this season.
I think the situation coming into the season was, and this is not fully established fact, but I think it's clear enough. The situation coming into the season was that the Grizzlies were not comfortable offering a major extension to Ja Morant. So that didn't happen. So if they were not,
I think if they were comfortable, they would have done it.
It would have happened, right? So if that was the situation coming into the season, it's pretty clear nothing has changed since the beginning of the season that would alter that viewpoint so far. I mean, he's missed half the games, and when he's played, he's been erratic, right? So there's nothing logically that would have changed that starting point, right? But at the same time, because nothing has changed that starting point, that probably makes it harder to trade Morant for decent value. And so to me, the underlying logic suggests giving it more time. It does. It suggests let's play out this season. Let's see if we can get Edey back. Let's see if we can get the team together. Let's see what it looks like down the stretch. Let's see what it looks like in hopefully some postseason basketball, and then have a little bit more information to maybe make a decision in the summer. I don't know if that's where it's headed, but to me, that's where the logic suggests it's probably headed to get through the deadline and keep going with it.
The Edey piece to it is so important, and I have a little bit of uneasiness thinking about the Edey situation as I think back to Vince Williams Jr.'s situation where he had the stress reaction and came back, and then it wasn't quite the same.
And then he finally got it together. Now he's out again with basically an inflammation kind of, it's a repetitive, it's a patellar tendonitis is what they're calling it, but that's also known as jumper's knee, and it's basically a workload, situation. Right.
So I don't love that it does not, like the most recent example of a situation like this is Vince Williams Jr., and that hasn't played out very well. And so to what extent you're going to get Edey back, you'd assume. Is he going to be physically the same player he was? I think is still very much a question. And so how does that sort of impact how you analyze, the capabilities of him and Ja together moving forward? These are all interesting questions, but I think these next 6 weeks do seem to be very important for Ja Morant, right? And for the Grizzlies and trying to figure out what they are going to do in the future. At least even if they decide to wait, it's not taking the possibility of pressing the trade button in the example that we've used off the table in these next 6 weeks. That is going to be there no matter what.
It can also help make a case for an extension,
Right. It could go the other way. So these next six weeks seem to be pretty important for Ja from an availability standpoint, but also from a production standpoint.
Yeah.
What are you going to be watching? Like what do you need to see? Like what are the important markers to hit here for Ja Morant?
I mean, it starts with being on the floor, right? That's the obvious thing. But in addition to that, I want to see consistency. On both ends. I want to see, a sense of seriousness as a point guard trying to control the game. It's a tricky thing for him to manage how much he calls his own number and how much he tries to set other people up. And that's just that's the job, right? As a point guard. And so, but I want to see consistency. I want to see, defensive effort. I want to see a guy who's trying to manage the game and navigate to wins, right? And is putting his fingerprints on the game without taking himself out of the team context of it. It's a tricky thing for him, but that's what I want to see. And ultimately you want to see him looking like an all-star most nights, A, being on the floor most nights, and B, looking like an all-star most nights. He's 26 years old. He's made an all-NBA team. He's supposed to be, if not, a top 10 player in the league, which he was when he made second team all-NBA. He's supposed to be at least an all-star level lead guard. And if you want to see him look like an all-star level lead guard most nights to be able to feel good about it. What do you think?
I think that the consistency part of it seems to be the part that's publicly noted already. I was not there at the Milwaukee game, but I took that was part of the conversation leaving the game. Right, was a desire for more consistency.
It was specifically about the availability. I mean, Isolo basically said Ja needs to start stacking games. And Ja echoed that in the post game. And the implication there was to really find a rhythm, you got to start playing consistently to get a consistent rhythm on the floor. So the consistent performance starts with consistent availability.
I'm less interested in the defensive stuff. Yeah. I know that he has made progress. If you go back and look at some of his defensive ratings from the early seasons, the 22-23 season, he was a liability on the court. Now that's not necessarily the case. He definitely got better. The Washington game statistically was one of his more poor defensive performances on the season. But I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in him finding the flow of the offense, finding a way to sort of make himself fit. It kind of goes back to, when he was asked on the initial return, how he can make himself fit within the context of the team and how does he balance that. And he was kind of coy with his answer and said, I'm going to keep my honest answer to myself on that. But, then he ended up, saying, I got to set up my teammates. I got to find different ways to impact the defense, all that sort of thing. That's great. But I just want to see it, right? We can't just talk about it. I just want to see it. I want to see him do it on a night-to-night basis and stay healthy. And the other part of the trade stuff, and I mean, it gets brought up a lot, is just like, what are the Grizzlies trading for right now if they're trading Ja Morant before the trade deadline? It also sort of plays into the idea, or my idea of, reasoning for holding on to this decision and waiting until a later time because, as of now, he's been unable to stay on the court so far this season. He hasn't been extremely consistent.
I think the decision is – this is why I wonder about how long you can stretch it out. I think you can definitely stretch it out to the summer. But I wonder about stretching it out beyond the summer because to me it's a decision about an individual player and a very important individual player, but it's also a decision about the direction of your franchise over multiple seasons, right? Because to your point about what would you be looking for if you did trade him, I don't think it would be about what you're looking for. I think it'd be about the course you're setting, which is, it would be an exit strategy. It would not be an active pursuit of some other thing you can get by trading Ja Morant. It would be a decision about we're going a different way with the team. And how long can you wait to make that decision? Are we going in a different direction, or are we staying on this direction where it's built partly around, or at least with, in a major way, this player? And I think it could go either way. But I think at some point they have to decide what they're doing, because if they're going to go in a different way, you want to go ahead and start doing it.
I think you can afford to wait a little bit, though.
I agree. That's why I'm saying the logic
Edey is in his second season. Yeah. Cedric Coward's going to get better, and he's early in his career. Jaren is still young, right? Yeah. He's 25, 26 years old. So, I mean, I think you can afford to wait longer.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yes, I understand wanting to set that course as soon as possible, and maybe that speeds up the timeline if you are going to fully pivot, which, again, they haven't suggested that they're going to do. But I think you can afford to wait in this situation, and the more I've thought about it, the more I think that they should wait. I also do wonder, just to contradict myself a little bit here, if we do overthink a little bit on the Ja value stuff, because I could see there being a playoff team that's like, wait a minute, there's a 35 point per game playoff performer in the past who may be available, and we can get him at a price that we think is good. Like, yeah, like let's go try to go get Ja Morant from the Memphis Grizzlies. I wonder if because of all of the other outside noise, people will say Ja has no trade value. Ja has no trade value because of whatever. Right. He's still Ja Morant. He's still Ja Morant.
I feel like what I'm about to say is accurate. Is there's just so much stuff. I think amid all the noise and the chatter, I think the only actual reporting that came out, and this was light, but it was actual reporting, was that two teams were named, Minnesota and Sacramento, that in the aftermath of all the stuff early in the season, that those teams did call to inquire about the potential availability of Morant, and that the Grizzlies basically said whatever they said, they rebuffed it. We're not looking to trade Morant. But that was two teams that reached out like actively to have interest, right? Which suggests, if there's interest, there could be value. And so I think you might be right. And I think, if he's playing great over the next 5 or 6 weeks, and there are teams that see that as like, we could do something right now, and this could be the thing that gets us over the hump. Maybe interesting conversations emerge that also may make the Grizzlies even more reluctant to engage in conversations.
I still wouldn't do it. I want to see what he looks like with Edey on the court. Yeah. I want to give it some time to play out, and it's been disappointing that we haven't had that opportunity, prior to 6 weeks before, 5 weeks before the NBA trade deadline. But the other there's nothing immediate that has to happen.
The other tangential piece, and then we move on to something else before we wrap up, but the other tangential piece of the puzzle, which I didn't mention in this column at all, is in the last few days there's been this eruption of, again, chatter, quasi-reporting about Trae Young. Atlanta could be making this. Atlanta's facing this similar decision with Trae Young. Their clock is different because I think he only has 1 year left, and I think he's got a player option. And so there's more time pressure on Atlanta than there is on Memphis. But there's been reporting in the last few days that Atlanta may be deciding to, okay, we're gonna move on. We're gonna move in a different direction. We're gonna look for an exit strategy with Trae Young. If they do make that decision, and what they get in return will be interesting to see. I think for better or worse, Morant and Trae Young have been lumped together in a lot of ways.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on from the Ja stuff. I know that's, a high priority in terms of Grizzlies fans and their interest in this season. But first, let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Okay, Jaren.
Yeah.
In a little bit of a different situation here. He has been on the court. He was not consistent early in the season. He has now found consistency, I think, over these last few weeks. That, he's had a couple of games where he didn't play as well. The game against Washington where he fouled out in the second half was one that was rough. OKC was a little bit rough. That's rough for everybody. But seems to be playing a lot better than he was at the beginning of the season. Where do we think this is coming from?
Yeah, he faded a little bit offensively down the stretch against that Wizards game. But let's look at this. The last 4 games the Grizzlies have won, okay? These are the wins. Over Milwaukee, 24 points, 9 rebounds, 5 blocks, and a steal. Against the Jazz, 21 points, 7 rebounds, 3 blocks, and a steal. Against Minnesota on the road, 28 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks, and a steal. Against the Clippers on the road, 31 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 blocks, 2 steals. That's all NBA production in those games. That's a guy, averaging in the mid to high 20s with that's defensive player of the year level disruption, block plus steal stock totals, rebounding up. It's been a really good stretch, and bad stretches could always be around the corner. But I think it's interesting what Isla said a couple things. I think before the Milwaukee game, which I think were quite interesting. And he was asked a simple question, and he took it in other places. And one thing he said was he made a reference to he and Jaren getting to know each other better, and Jaren finding comfort in the offense over the course of the season. Isla actively brought that up. The other thing he said was that he felt like Jaren was probably, he didn't say too much or whatever. I don't want to mischaracterize it, but he said that Jaren, tried very hard to get back quickly from injury stuff. You're talking about, he didn't say specifically, but I think probably referencing both the toe surgery he had in the summer, and also he had a little ankle thing earlier in the season. He said Jaren is very motivated to get back on the court quickly, and that he suggested that Jaren, partly for that reason, has had to play himself back into shape over the course of the season. Like he's been ramping up on the court. It's basically kind of how he suggested it. And that Jaren is in a better place physically now than he was early in the season. And I think that may well be true.
The blocks has certainly sort of found a way to balance itself out. Now, if you go per 36, his blocks per game at 1.8, which it was, his block percentage was the lowest of his career as of just a few weeks ago, and now 1.8 in line with what he did the previous 2 seasons, including his All-Star season last year.
And trending up.
Yes. So I think it's been the defense coming along has made a big difference for Jaren. And I mentioned it on the last podcast, and I still believe it to be true. It's almost the inverse of a lot of players where you talk about how defense fuels offense. I almost think now that Jaren's been able to get some shots to go, it's made him a better defensive player. It's elevated the confidence a little bit. So it's been good to see him sort of get back in a rhythm for this team, and the 3-point percentage is coming back up too. That was a big part of this.
I think that's always going to be up and down. It's going to be those things where he has good stretches and bad stretches. You look at the end of the season, and it's like, oh, he shot 36% from three. That's pretty good for a 6'11" guy. You know, that's just kind of. I think it's baked in that he's going to be up and down as a 3-point shooter.
I was interested to see if he would develop as a passer because obviously he's seeing a lot more double teams and all of that this year.
A little bit.
It's been roughly the same as last year.
Statistically, I think you watch it play, you see him he's made some notable passes where like a couple of these recent games he's had like double teams come and he's made like aggressive cross court passes to find open shooters, some of that stuff. But it's not. I've always thought that's the last piece of the puzzle with Jaren that you probably just never get to. Yeah.
I mean, the averages are down. Obviously, the usage percentage is down for Jaren this year too. Do you expect, like, we talked about Isla's system, and one thing I was interested in learning, and I think you were too, and is something we talked about as Jaren struggled early in the season, was Isla's system in Europe basically was he used his bigs as screeners and guys that crashed the basket and went and got offensive rebounds. And that was the extent of what they did. And then we talked about Isla really never coaching a player like Jaren before and having to find different ways to get him the ball and get him in advantageous situations. That, I think, the learning curve that had to exist there definitely had a hit on his usage. It's at 25.2% this season. So usage percentage is possessions that end with the ball in his hands, whether that be an assist, a shot, or a turnover.
Right.
25.2% is as low as it has been since his All-Star season in 22-23.
I would just interrupt briefly to say when you're talking about season percentages, you're not capturing. You're talking about a season number. You're not capturing an arc or a trend.
Mm-hmm.
And so like statistics are snapshots of the past, right? They're not snapshots. They're what's the word I'm looking for? They're an average of the past. They're not a present general condition, right? And so, you know, players can change over the course of the season, and that not necessarily reflected in a total number because that includes a past that no longer exists, kind of thing. So I think with Jaren, it's an interesting question because the idea of the Islo quote unquote system was so much about the idea of the guards and the bigs, meaning Zach Edey, not Jaren Jackson. It was sort of this idea of having Ja Morant and Zach Edey, and then behind Ja Morant having Ty Jerome and Scottie Pippen, and you have these on-ball guards who are good off screens. You have this big screening big. Well, he hasn't had any of that. Like 2 of those 4 guys haven't played, and the 2 most important ones haven't played together but 4.5 minutes. And so Islo has been forced to change that approach and to find other ways. And so I think part of it is Jaren getting more comfortable, but also part of it is Islo's had to adjust to go to Jaren more. And I think that the question, if they ever get there, is, okay, how does this work when you bring both Ja Morant and Zach Edey back into the mix with Jaren and you have all 3? And that's what everybody wants to see. Like, what happens there? I think it's been interesting that with Ja coming back, it has not diminished Jaren at all. And that's been a question for the Grizzlies for years, way before Islo. And the last 3 games that Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson have played together, 31 points, 25 field goal attempts for Jaren against Washington, 24 points, 18 field goal attempts against Milwaukee. And then going back to the last game Ja played before the injury, 31 points, 18 field goal attempts for the Clippers. So the idea of Jaren being the stand in the corner and watch guy when Ja Morant's playing, at least this month, that has changed.
Gigi Jackson's back on the court. He's gotten some run as of late and had
been good.
a good performance. He comes back after another stint in
it's
the
funny,
G League.
the injuries finally swung Gigi's way, right?
I know.
The guards and the centers were getting injured and Gigi wasn't getting the play. Then you look up and Brandon Clark gets injured and John Conchar gets injured and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is now injured. And silver lining is that Gigi's gotten into the mix and taken advantage of it.
Do you feel like he has – maybe it's too early. In fact, it almost certainly is too small of a sample size. But does the eye test tell you his defense has improved enough to stay on the court and be a part of the rotation?
I mean, it's 4 games through them coming off the bench. The steal numbers are very good. I think probably that's more of a blip than a trend. I just gave 4 steals against Washington. I think the effort has been good. The physicality has been good. As how much has the awareness improved? I think it's something that bears watching. I think it bears watching.
He's going to shoot better than 16% from 3 too.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm in favor of at least keeping him part of the rotation, and he should be, because now you've got more players that are out. Somebody's got to play.
Right.
But where do you think Gigi is trending, as a player? He's still so young. It feels like he's had all these opportunities. I know he has a lot of fans. There's a lot of folks that really want him to do well and want him to get opportunities even when he's not getting opportunity. Where is the trust level that Gigi Jackson's going to become a meaningful NBA rotation player at this stage of his career? I mean,
again, he just turned 21 a few days ago.
Yeah.
And so I think the odds are pretty good for him on that front. I think multiple coaches now have sort of struggled to trust him in meaningful situations because of, I think, some of the team defense and awareness stuff and maybe some of the shot selection stuff. And I think Gigi's willingness to go now in his 3rd season, to play summer league in a 3rd season, to go to the Memphis Hustle, to work to try to get himself in a better place for serious basketball, I think should be lauded. And I think you're seeing some of the results now. I personally struggle with his game a little bit, probably. I mean, we all have our sort of biases as basketball fans. And from a stylistic standpoint, the Gigi Jackson game is not the kind of game I'm as attracted to, I like the guys who it's like defense, move the ball, like Kyle Anderson kind of players, Vince Williams kind of players. Gigi's just not quite that kind of player. He's more of a scoring oriented kind of player, and he struggles a little bit with the flow stuff. But it's all part of the same game, right? It's just how you stitch it together. And I think the tools are there for him to stitch it together in a really positive way. We'll see if he does.
He's more of the Cam Spencer mold, That was Cam Spencer before this season, before he found different avenues to sort of improve his game and make his impact on the team, was just viewed as an offensive only sort of
Well, no, there was
player.
the idea that to pull a name out of the past, there was an idea that Cam Spencer was going to be like a Troy Daniels type, who was a shooting specialist the Grizzlies had, who was a great shooter, but that's all he could do. And so they couldn't really keep him on the floor that much. And there was I sort of wondered, is that what Cam Spencer is, right? Is he Troy Daniels? Which is good to have as the 15th guy on a minimum contract, but there's a limit to that. And what Cam Spencer has done is completely blown up that idea of what he is.
Yeah, I would just, to circle back on Gigi, just say there is no reason that someone that athletic and 6'10" should be only a bucket getter in the NBA. I think that's part of why they've pushed him so hard to improve in other aspects of his game, because the athletic tools are there to impact a game defensively, to impact a game in transition.
I agree, but I do think, and I've noted this before, I do think for all the focus on Gigi on like the court awareness, that kind of stuff, I do think there's an aspect to his physicality that's a little partial. I think he's a very upright athlete, which I think works when you're getting downhill and you're just really like forceful downhill drives. You can get above the rim. You can drive into the chest of the defender. I think he's a little stiff with his lateral movement. I don't think he is as limber an athlete laterally as like Jalen Wells and Cedric Howard and some of these guys are. I actually do think that impacts his defense beyond just the awareness stuff.
Do we want to do a quick injury sort of run through real quick before we get into the
I'm going to sit back and let you go.
So
I'm going to let you cook.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be cooking anything up right here. So we've got Zach Edey, whose return timeline is probably going to be first here. This is excluding guys that are more close to
I'm
day
not
to
sure.
day.
I'm not sure.
Not return timeline. Excuse me. Reevaluation timeline.
Yes. That's key.
The vocabulary is very important.
Right.
Can't screw that up. So that's coming up within the next couple of weeks.
Should be right on the eve of that European trip.
Yes.
There should be some update.
There's that. You've got Jock Landale, who seems more like the day-to-day type because he has been questionable and then out the last couple of games. Scottie Pippen Jr., that's going to be a post-trade deadline. It feels like still a ways away on that. Vince Williams Jr. is a little bit of a mystery.
They haven't said anything about Vince, and there's so much else going on. They haven't really been asked about it.
Ty Jerome, I think his reevaluation timeline has passed, and he had a return to play timeline, which would come, I think, also in the same range-ish as the Edey timeline. It would be right around the European trip.
I want to say the 3-week range on Jerome, because it was a 3-week return to play range, which is a wide range, and it carried from early January to late January. Until I hear otherwise, I'm assuming late January on that.
Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, we should have more of an update on after the game tonight, but still nothing yet. John Conchar had surgery. Feels like that's going to be a little bit. I wouldn't hold my breath on that. And then who am I missing? Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark, I guess we're still waiting on a reevaluation period for him.
Yeah, it was going to
when was that?
It was going to be I want to say it was a 3 or 4 week until he's reevaluated kind of thing. I don't think there was a return to play designation. I think that was a reevaluation designation. And I want to say it was 3 or 4 weeks. And that was after being back for a game and change. That's rough.
Do you think there's a chance the Grizzlies will make some two-way changes? I know this is something you might have hinted at.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because one of the Christian Coloco, who they signed to this hardship exception, this 10-day, tonight's game, as we're recording against the Sixers, I'm pretty sure is the last game, not necessarily the last day, but the last game on his 10-day. You can sign players, if you're still eligible for the hardship exception, you can sign them for a second 10-day. My suspicion is that they will be eligible for a second to extend the hardship exception, and that based on what he's been doing, they will get him for a second 10-day. I'm not reporting that, but that's sort of my assumption, and that buys them time. One of the distinctions, one thing about him that's maybe surprising to people, because he is 25, he is still eligible to be on a two-way contract. Charles Bassey was not. Coloco is. Now, they have all those contracts full right now. Javon Small, Jemai Mashek, and Omax Prosper. And so if you get through a second 10-day with Coloco and you still like what you see, would you clear a 10-day a two-way for him? You could. I don't know that they would, but it's something to at least, put in the back of your head.
I don't think you could. I mean, Omax has shown you enough, I think, to.
Well, the question is, who do you think is more utility for you, Omax Prosper or Christian Coloco? It may depend on what your injury situation is at that point.
It may depend on your injury situation. It may depend on your interest in those players moving forward beyond this season.
Prosper is younger. Yeah.
Prosper is younger. Yeah.
The Mashek thing's interesting because I don't know. Obviously, when they drafted him, there was an understanding that they were going to try to develop him, and there was an understanding that he would not immediately. He may not immediately be on a two-way when they drafted him. I think,
and he was not, and then he was added,
and now he was added. It feels, in the absence of some other agreement, it feels like they jumped the gun with that a little bit. Could you not have strung that along later? But I don't know what their understanding was with the agent. There may be an understanding of him getting that two-way in season. So that may be something you just don't mess with.
And then Javon Small, obviously, I think
that's the one you're not messing with.
You're probably not going to touch.
Yeah.
And you haven't even really seen him in all that much action because he's been hurt. So, yeah, the two-way roster situation does have some questions to be answered there. Okay, Grizzlies' upcoming schedule. We mentioned they'll play the Sixers tonight. Beyond that, you've got the Lakers twice on the road, Friday and Sunday.
No Austin Reeves.
You've got San Antonio.
This is a thing, by the way.
6th.
as much as people fret about the Grizzlies' injury situation, which is worse than most other teams, if not all other teams.
Wrote about it on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, you did. You wrote about this. It's not. Injuries are everywhere, but it's more in Memphis. This is true. At the same time, they beat Minnesota without Anthony Edwards. They beat Milwaukee without Giannis Antetokounmpo. They've played the Spurs twice without Wemby. They're about to play the Lakers twice without Austin Reeves. They're catching some breaks too.
Yeah, I would note on the injury stuff. This was as of Christmas Eve, so this is now a week later. But the Grizzlies had 8 players out at that time. There were 12 teams with at least 5 players out.
That's a lot.
As of Christmas Eve.
It's
now,
all over the league.
Yes, it has definitely been more difficult for the Grizzlies than other teams. I think as of now, I'd be interested to revisit this, but they were just behind Oklahoma City in terms of games missed due to injury.
And the OKC thing
is
the 14th and 15th guys on the roster, neither of whom have ever played an NBA game. So and they're out for the season. So come on.
How about I also listed in this story, I just pulled it back up because I was interested to pull this up. How about the NBA's all calf strain team? This was as of Christmas Eve. Some of these guys have since come back, but you had Drew Holiday, Austin Reeves, Evan Mobley, Giannis, Victor Wembanyama, Ty Jerome, Ben Shepherd, Gabe Vincent, Brandon Clark, Larry Nance Jr., and Isaiah Hartenstein. All calf strains.
Well, if you expand it to calf soreness, which is what the designation is for Jock Landale, he could be on that team right now.
I know. I mean, that's a championship level roster there of just calf strains. It was that was wild. So anyway, you've got a more challenging schedule coming up. Beyond the Lakers, you got the Spurs at home, and then the Suns at home. The Grizzlies will welcome back old friend Dillon Brooks. Who just happened to be at that game in Washington. Yeah. Did you note the photos that Ja Morant posted on his Instagram story?
No. I saw that Brooks was there, but I didn't see the Ja Instagram.
He posted a photo of him and Dillon Brooks sitting together before the Grizzlies game in Washington. I wonder who Dillon Brooks was cheering for in that game. Something tells me Dillon Brooks may have a little bit of a bone to pick with the Grizzlies. Not his former teammates, but maybe the organization.
I'm sure he has mixed feelings in that regard, but those are still his guys, Jaren and Ja in particular.
You mentioned the Grizzlies have struggled to sort of beat the better teams in the NBA. And by the way, there's a lot of these teams that are getting got by some of the bottom of the league. If you look at San Antonio recently, they have been victims.
Yeah. Lost at home to Utah after beating the Thunder 3 games in a row. And I flipped on my league pass and saw the Wolves fall at home to Brooklyn. So, yeah.
Yeah. What's a good outcome here? The next 4 you got. Well, let's throw Sixers out because they're going to play tonight and people aren't going to listen to this until after. What's a good outcome for the next 4 for the Grizzlies? You got Lakers, Spurs.
Well, I want to extend it out and let's go to the next
5 with the
next 6. You got that home game against Phoenix, home against OKC. I think if they went 3-3, it'd be great. Win home against Philly, which will happen tonight as we record. Win home against Phoenix. Get a split on the road against the Lakers without Austin Reeves. And if you did that and then you lost at home to San Antonio, OKC, I think that would be pretty good actually against that schedule. I mean, they got 2 wins all season against teams with winning records. If you get 3 in the next 2 weeks, that'd be great. But that seems like maybe too much. 2-4? Would you take 2-4?
I might consider taking 2-4, but you want to beat Phoenix, help yourself out. I mean, that I would take 2-4 if you said that you would beat Phoenix in that stretch. Because again, Phoenix is a team you're looking at when it comes to.
I just think at some point it was interesting. ESPN did a thing a couple of days ago where they projected out the rest of the season, and they had the Grizzlies finishing at 42-40 in a 9th place. Well, that is a winning record, and so that would be winning more games the rest of the way because they're currently 15-17. I just think if you're going to get back to 500 at some point, you got to start getting some wins against teams that are with winning records.
I'm trying to pull up as we speak right now. The NBA's projected standings according to team rankings. So they have team rankings has Memphis projected to finish 39-43.
So they're a little more pessimistic than ESPN.
A little bit more pessimistic. And then they have Phoenix finishing 45-30.
It was interesting. The ESPN thing had Phoenix only 1 game ahead of the Grizzlies. They had Phoenix at 43 and the Grizzlies at 42 at the end of the season.
They currently give Phoenix a 73.6% chance to make the playoffs. So not ideal for the Grizzlies, who thought maybe that Phoenix pick could be a lottery pick. Memphis, meanwhile, 31.4% chance to make the playoffs, according to TeamRankings.com. So we'll see how things go. I think it'll be an interesting stretch, and it'll all lead up to those international games for the Memphis Grizzlies, which is going to be really fun just to follow. It'll be interesting to see the Grizzlies on the global stage and see how people react to it, to see if the Grizzlies can get some fans over in Europe, make some memories. So I think everybody is looking forward to that. Anything else from you, Chris, before we get out of here? Go read Chris's column. He wrote about the Ja stuff.
Yeah, go read all the stuff. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
We're going to go watch some basketball.
Yeah, let's go watch some basketball. Everybody have a happy new year.